Browns have their first preseason game at Cleveland Browns Stadium against the Commanders. They lose 17-15. Their second preseason game overall, but Kevin Stefanski kind of approached it like the first preseason game. The starters did play a series for the offense, a few series for the defense, but the real story coming out of this game, Mary Kay, I feel like we have to start here, unfortunately, is probably the kicking situation, because Cade York missed another kick tonight against the Commanders, and now there's some real questions. Now, I know Kevin was asked about Cade after the game, seemed to show support, but I'm just curious what's going on behind the scenes in Berea right now.
You know, I would have to think that they are having some kind of internal discussion about what to do about their kicking situation. They would never say that publicly. And again, as you mentioned, Kevin came out and publicly supported Cade York after the game, said he's a young kicker working through some issues. But now, back-to-back kicks. He's 0 for 2 in preseason. He pushed a 49-yarder wide right against the Jets, a 46-yarder tonight. And I think they have to be at least thinking about contingency plans.
Yeah, Ashley, and look, we know this is a very patient regime when it comes to their draft picks. We know they're going to try to be patient with Cade, but you can't start losing games because your kicker is missing kicks, especially with this roster that you've built to win now.
Yeah, and I think, too, what's concerning about it for me is this is a range that he struggled with last year. I think I wrote it in my story after the game, but half of his misses last year, he had 10 misses. Half of those came from between 30 yards out and 49 yards out. So I definitely think it's fair to question, like, hey, how long is his leash going to be going forward? Because this is the second straight year they haven't brought another kicker in to even compete with him during camp. And I'm starting to wonder if that was a mistake.
Now, let's look at the positive of this, Mary Kay. The offense, they looked good. Deshaun Watson, we saw multiple formations. We saw Elijah Moore running the ball out of the backfield as a running back. We saw him make a catch. Everything seemed to work really well on that first drive until they got down to the goal line. I personally am not real concerned about that because Nick Chubb was not playing. So I think that turns out differently if Nick Chubb is running the ball there. But the offense looked very promising in their one series.
Well, think about the fact that not only was Nick Chubb not out there, but Jerome Ford was not out there either, and he's their number 2 back. So they were down to a number 3 back and a number 4 back who they don't even know will be on the roster when they get down to the 53 on August 29th. So I think they would have been able to punch it in, although there were times that I was thinking, Kareem Hunt sometimes looks pretty good here from the 1 too. But yeah, that's going to be an opportunity for Nick or Jerome to get that in that situation. They'll also be running behind Joel Bitonio. That will help them. He wasn't out there tonight. So I don't think that's a concern. I think the takeaway from the first team offense was Deshaun looked good. He took control. He wanted to take control. He made plays with his arms. He made plays with his legs, and he ran the offense efficiently.
Yeah, Deshaun just looked sharp today, Ashley. Sharper, really, than he did at any point last season during those 6 games that we saw him.
Yeah, I mean, I think, too, especially like we talked about, what would our worst-case scenario for this game be? And I think it would have been if he came out and looked like he did in that Jacksonville preseason game from a year ago, which was really like the only time we saw him, he only completed 1 of 5 passes or something like that and just looked rattled almost. And I thought, like you said, Dan, he came out there, he looked confident, he looked assured. There was even that little scramble he had, and I think it was 3rd and 4 where he almost slipped on his drop back, regained his balance, and then ran and got the first down. So it was little moments like that. It wasn't a lot, but it was way better, I think, than any time we saw him last year. Much more comfortable.
Now, defensively, they looked good, too. They got a safety on a holding penalty when Zadarius Smith beat the right tackle inside, and he was probably going to come away with a sack, if not for the hold. No Denzel Ward, no Myles Garrett, no Greg Newsome, obviously, in this game, as well as Newsome is dealing with an injury. Ward and Garrett were resting. But Mary Kay, again, same as the offense. The defense, at least the starters, looked very promising.
Yeah, and again, you did not have a full complement on defense out there. And when you don't have Myles and you don't have Denzel, you don't have your Pro Bowlers out there, it's not going to be exactly what it's going to look like against the Bengals on September 10th. But a lot of the backup guys came in there. They did a really nice job. Again, Zadarius got his feet wet. Obo got his feet wet in this defense. They made some plays. They got a couple of interceptions. They did what you would want a defense to do that's going to be opportunistic, that's going to be attacking, that's going to be aggressive, and we saw all of that.
Yeah, and Ashley, just after the game, hearing from Za'Darius, I know you had a chance to talk to Obo and some of the other defenders. It just seemed like they were happy to get out there and get into this defense a little.
Yeah, I think Obo was the one who brought up, like, I was just happy to be out there and hitting somebody that's not on my team, which, like, we've obviously seen him and James Hudson get after one another and how often these guys are really matched up with a certain counterpart on offense. So I think it's understandable why they're so excited to go out there and hit somebody different. It's also why I think the defense in particular is so excited for those joint practices in Philadelphia. They're already talking about it.
Well, perfect segue, because I did want to ask about that since we aren't going to do another video here before those joint practices kick off. It'll be the Browns going against the Eagles, and Za'Darius Smith said it, Mary Kay. They are excited to go against that offensive line. It might be the best offensive line in football, so it will offer a great test for this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good test for so many areas of this football team. I mean, they have to go against Jalen Hurts. They've got to go against a really good defensive front, one that I believe led the NFL with sacks last year. I think they did. It was like something like 70. So it is a really, really good team all the way around. You don't go to the Super Bowl unless you are the cream of the crop, and they will have a tremendous test against this football team.
And Ashley, I want to see how they respond because they got pushed around a little bit in these joint practices last year, and I feel like they kind of know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone with two eyes kind of knows that. I mean, Dan, we were talking about it before this game, again, how much we kind of used those practices last year as a benchmark and even still kind of refer back to them. And especially watching how the defense struggled against those receivers and tight ends in Philly. It was in Berea, but against the Eagles, I think was kind of telling of some problems we were going to see later on.
All right, Browns losers today in preseason game number 2. Not a big deal. We are barreling towards the regular season, and most importantly, those joint practices coming up on Monday and Tuesday. We'll have full coverage of the game, of those practices, everything in between at cleveland.com/Browns.